Walk into almost any home in Britain and you will find single-glazed windows, original timber frames, cold to the touch in October, streaming with condensation by December. Behind them, heating systems burning through hundreds of pounds a year just to compensate for the heat disappearing straight through the glass. Double glazing has existed since the 1970s. It is not experimental technology. It is not expensive to manufacture. It works. Every country in Northern Europe has adopted it as standard. Britain has not. And that refusal is costing British homeowners an estimated £4 billion every single year. Here is exactly why it happened and why it is still happening now. The story starts not with glass but with stone. Britain's housing stock is the oldest in Europe. Roughly 38% of all homes currently standing were built before 1945. Another 21% went up before 1980. These are Victorian terraces, Edwardian semis, Georgian townhouses, buildings designed around single-glazed sash windows and solid wall construction at a time when insulation was not a concept anyone had considered. The windows were not a design flaw. They were the only option that existed. The problem is that most of them are still there. Britain never had a mass replacement moment. No federal program, no regulatory mandate, no point at which the old stock was systematically upgraded. The houses simply stayed as they were built, generation after generation, and the windows stayed with them. Then came the listed building system, introduced under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947 and expanded significantly in the 1960s and 1970s. Listed status placed legal protection over buildings of historical or architectural interest. Grade I, Grade 2 starred, Grade 2. Roughly 400,000 buildings in England alone carry some form of listed designation. For every one of them, replacing original windows requires planning permission from the local authority. In conservation areas, which cover entire streets and neighborhoods rather than individual buildings, even unlisted properties face the same restrictions. You cannot replace a sash window with a double-glazed unit without approval. In many cases, approval is refused outright on the grounds that it would alter the character of the building. The result is that millions of homeowners are legally prohibited from installing technology that would cut their heating bills by up to 15% annually. The law that was written to protect heritage is simultaneously locking families into cold homes and escalating energy bills. Outside the listed system, the barrier is different. It is not legal. It is financial. Replacing windows across an average British semi-detached home costs between £5,000 and £10,000 depending on the number of units and the specification chosen. For a Victorian terrace requiring sympathetic timber double-glazed units rather than standard UPVC, that figure climbs higher. The Energy Saving Trust estimates the annual saving on heating bills from double glazing at between £110 and £235 per year depending on the property. At those numbers, the payback period on a full replacement runs to between 25 and 40 years. Most homeowners will not live in the same property long enough to recover the cost. The investment makes no financial sense on an individual basis, even when it makes complete sense at a national one. So it doesn't get made. The government has attempted to close this gap multiple times. The Green Deal, launched in 2013, offered loans for energy efficiency improvements repaid through energy bills. It was supposed to make double glazing affordable for households who couldn't fund it up front. By 2015, it had effectively collapsed. Fewer than 15,000 measures had been installed under the scheme against a target of millions. The interest rates on Green Deal loans were higher than standard personal loans available on the open market. Homeowners who could afford to borrow did so more cheaply elsewhere. Homeowners who couldn't afford to borrow at all were left exactly where they started. The scheme was closed in 2019, and its replacement, the energy company obligation, has reached a fraction of the properties originally projected. What this produces is a split that runs through the entire housing market. Homes built after 2002 are required by building regulations to include double glazing as standard. They are warm, efficient, and cheap to heat. Homes built before that date, which is the majority of the British housing stock, are not required to upgrade and largely haven't. Britain now has a two-tier housing market defined not by location or size, but by the year of construction. A new build flat on the edge of town will cost a fraction of a Victorian terrace to heat through winter. The terrace will sell for more. The running costs will be higher, and the owner will have limited legal and financial routes to close the gap. The countries that solved this did so through a combination of subsidy, regulation, and cultural expectation that Britain never assembled in the same place at the same time. Germany introduced mandatory energy efficiency standards for existing buildings alongside accessible low-interest state financing to fund compliance. The Netherlands ran mass retrofit programs targeting entire streets at once, reducing unit costs through scale and removing the coordination problem that stops individual homeowners acting alone. Denmark tied energy performance ratings to property transactions, making poor insulation visible at the point of sale and financially penalizing sellers of inefficient homes. In each case, the mechanism was different. The outcome was the same. The old stock got upgraded because the system made upgrading unavoidable rather than optional. Britain made it optional. And when something that costs £5,000 to £10,000 up front with a 40-year payback period is optional, most people do not do it. Not because they are indifferent to their heating bills, because the economics do not work at the household level even when they work clearly at the national one. The £4 billion lost annually to inadequately insulated windows is not lost by one person making one bad decision. It is lost by millions of people making the only rational decision available to them inside a system that was never designed to produce a different outcome. Walk past any Victorian terrace on a cold morning in January and you will see it. Condensation running down original sash windows. Heat pouring out through glass that has not changed in 150 years. A technology that would fix it sitting available, affordable and largely out of reach. Britain is not refusing to install double glazing because it doesn't understand the problem. It is refusing because the system built around its oldest homes makes solving the problem harder than living with it. And until that changes, the planning rules, the financing, the regulatory framework, the £4 billion will keep disappearing. One cold window at a time,